This interview is brought to you in association with Rabobank.
Hello and welcome to another of our Rural Delivery online interviews. I'm Roger Bourne and today I'm joined by James Parsons, Chairman of Beef and Lamb New Zealand. Hey James, thanks for making yourself available.
Pleasure to be here, Roger.
Yeah, well, you've had a busy time. You've been busy on your own property this morning, I know that. But look, recently you've been in Taupō and you've been hosting a very interesting group, the International Beef Alliance. Tell us about who they are.
So the International Beef Alliance is a group of essentially counterpart organisations similar to Beef and Lamb New Zealand that represent beef producers from USA, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, Paraguay and Australia and ourselves. So 7 countries represented, and what we do is we get together and sort of talk about areas that we have common interests. So looking at climate change, sustainability issues for beef, and also trade policy is very big on the agenda.
And is this a group that's been running for a while?
Yes, it has been. In terms of total production and exports, 46% of total beef production globally is represented by those countries, and 63% of exports of beef. A group to get alongside and sort of explore areas where we can work together.
You mentioned when you're in here, you're looking often at sustainability. Was there a theme to the visit down to New Zealand?
Yeah, there was. Obviously, water quality is a big issue that we're having to work through as beef producers, sheep and beef producers, but also the dairy sector as well here in New Zealand. And so that's something that there was quite a theme around, particularly going to Taupō where we hosted it. Of course, they've been working under a regulated system there for quite some time. So they were quite interested in how we are combating that.
Yep.
Not envious at all by the quite strict regulations we're having to work through, but conscious also. You're quite keen to understand how we navigate all that.
And did they have any advice for us?
No, probably not massively in terms of that. I think New Zealand is probably ahead of the curve in terms of the water quality debate and sort of regulation compared with some of our peers. Interesting, probably the beef producers from Australia, particularly those based up around Queensland, are quite conscious of what's coming their way with the reef there, Great Barrier Reef, off the coast. So they've certainly got quite a lot of things on the go. Yeah, but we're probably a little bit more ahead of things in terms of the regulatory framework around water quality.
Well, if we couldn't learn anything from them about water, what are the areas that you look to some of those specific countries for guidance on in terms of things that New Zealand either is facing or may face in the future? Yeah,
so probably the little bit of discussion around climate change and also just how the beef industry often gets tarred with quite a negative brush around that. Things like how much water is actually used to produce a kilo of beef. There's some quite wild and completely unsubstantiated numbers that get bandied around. And then kind of, I guess the other area is just around a lot of beef production is on class of land around the world that can't really be used for cropping or other sort of types of food production. So consequently, it's some of these metrics that line it up saying, we shouldn't produce beef, we should put it into crop production, etc., is actually kind of a little bit idealistic in terms of the class of countries that cattle are run on. Yeah, the other one area, Roger, was quite a big focus on trade and part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And so one of the really good things about the International Beef Alliance is a big focus on trade liberalisation. So all 5 countries that are involved in the Trans-Pacific Partnership have all signed a joint statement which will be we can use to our respective governments to really push for continued ratification, particularly the USA. It's obviously the big one and how that plays out. So there's quite a strong desire by everybody, particularly the National Cattlemen's Beef Association from the USA, to try and get that ratified through the lame duck session before Obama leaves office.
Any conversations about what might happen if TTP doesn't come off?
Yeah, pretty much no one really wanted to think about that, to be honest. It would be a huge lost opportunity. And so really I think all the focus is, right, let's focus on how we try and do our best to try and get this across the line.
And there is a role there, isn't there, for a lot of free trade deals generally often get hung up on primary production issues. So important that you have a voice and say that you want this to happen.
That's right. And I think this is one of the strengths of the International Beef Alliance, is that we were unique as in terms of the beef sector across those 5 countries, and those are all the biggest beef-producing countries that are involved in TPP, to be a united voice pushing for trade liberalisation and TPP. Unlike the dairy sector, where you had a lot of, not a coordinated view at all across the various member countries. So when the likes of Japan, for example, were, they're pretty hard negotiators trying to get a better deal, there was, across those 5 countries, it was very much closed ranks, and what we were advising to our respective governments was, no, we're not willing to do deals here. This has got to be, really good liberalisation. We only got a 9% tariff reduction, or down to a 9% tariff on beef into Japan from the 38.5%, but it was still a significant improvement.
One of the other big changes, of course, that everyone's looking at in terms of the trade environment is Brexit. What on earth is this going to mean for trade with a very important EU market, and of course a very important UK market? What is Beef and Lamb's take on what is happening there, and how might that change any of your activities?
Yeah, well, it's still too early to tell, really, Roger, at this stage. I've just come back from Europe prior to the International Beef Alliance. I was there at the start of October, and the Brexit certainly was dominating all the discussions. The overwhelming theme that I picked up from all the various farming leaders that we talk with, both within the EU 27 but also the UK, was a real desire for stability in the sheep meat market. So just to give you some headline numbers, about 228,000 tonnes is our total sheep meat access into the EU. That's for the 28 countries or 28 member states. And if you look at total lamb consumption in the EU, including UK, they're about 80% self-sufficient, and then they import 20%. And of that, New Zealand makes up close to 16% of the balance, and there's about 4% that comes in from other countries like Australia and a few other smaller countries. So what that means is, and I guess the key thing in that is that we supply lamb in the off-season when the local production is at a lower ebb, so because we're Southern Hemisphere. And so I think the key thing that's coming through, and I was heartened to hear this, was that they understand the importance of imported lamb to keep lamb on the shelf 12 months a year. And they really want stability in the market, which is good. I think there's a bit of a concern from a lot of people that the sort of European farming groups might really lobby their respective governments to use this as an opportunity to reduce access for New Zealand lamb. But and whilst that view will be pervading amongst the various farmers, I'm sure at the leadership level it wasn't something I picked up at all. In the short term,
Brexit, pounds plummeted. Is that going to hurt in the pre-Christmas trade?
I think certainly it is having an impact. It's taking the gloss off things when we thought we might be having a little bit of a recovery this year. What I'm hearing is that the prices in the UK are actually up on last year in terms of on a pound basis, but when we convert it back to New Zealand dollars with the exchange rate, we're actually behind. So I think the Christmas lamb may not be quite as badly impacted, but then, of course, as soon as we get past Christmas, then it's which is when our big volumes come on, we will be don't expect to be getting anything better than last year, possibly back a bit.
Now, Beef and Lamb has changed tack in terms of its approach to the UK market in some respects, and you're actually withdrawing some of your direct involvement in terms of having boots on the ground there. That was announced earlier this year. Any change to that thinking in light of Brexit?
Not in terms of changing the decision to close the office in the UK, and I think it's a very different role to what's required there for market access type work, which is more around mitigating any risks that fall out with Brexit. So consequently, the position we have in the UK is more around promotional work. What we've decided to do, and it's our new strategy for market development, is to move to pure market development, which is really developing new markets and new market segments rather than market maintenance. If you look at our exporters, we've got all the big companies have UK offices, and there's probably 50 or 60 people on the ground easily that are employed by New Zealand processor exporters that are there. So they've got very deep entrenched relationships with their customers. So it's not like we've got a lack of presence there. And the feedback we got from our exporters was they will look after more of the market maintenance type activities, but they want us to focus on developing new opportunities. Now we're still working out where those areas might be. It could be within Europe. It might be a new market segment in the UK, which is something that we haven't developed previously. So likewise, it could be somewhere else. But just to look at how we can develop new opportunities and leave the maintenance to the companies. But in terms of probably feet on the ground up there, I think we'll require some more trips for even potentially myself, senior management, to get up there and get alongside the UK and also European farming leaders and support our government with anything there. We do have a full-time staff member based in Brussels, however, who does look after market access for all of Europe and UK.
If we look at the broader marketing picture for New Zealand beef and lamb, is enough being spent overall if you look at the size of the industry versus the size of the spend?
Oh, look, the short answer I'd say is no, I don't think there is enough. And we're always challenged. We just sort of talked about the water quality debate and challenges earlier in this interview. And so we are feeling quite stretched as an organisation. Do we put more into telling the story and positioning our product, or more in terms of trying to underpin farmers' ability to farm back here in New Zealand? So I think with our new strategy, it's quite a fresh approach. It's more about telling the story rather than just talking about the functional attributes of the product in terms of taste and tenderness. It's more about actually some of the values and the philosophy that sits behind how we produce our product. It's a bit more of an emotive type story, but it's a lot more catchy.
Can you give us the elevator pitch version of it now?
Yeah, I guess if you think about the values of farmers and the way we produce our product, the love, the care, and the attention to detail, and also the way intergenerational farms often we have been stewards of the environment. Just getting out on the hill and mustering a mob of sheep or a mob of cattle, that's quite a romantic type of image, I guess, if you really play it up a bit.
Yes.
We take it for granted here in New Zealand, and all the values that go with that. It's about articulating that and establishing an emotional connection with the consumer around New Zealand beef or lamb, as opposed to just talking about the fact this tastes good or it's healthy for you, etc.
Yeah, it's also an interesting extension because, for years New Zealand's marketed itself on this purity. So we've talked about the place. So now and of course certainly we've talked about the product in terms of its individual attributes, but now you're putting a person into that conversation. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly, yeah. It's synonymous with the location as well. So it's really easy to kind of say all these great things about where the product's from and who we are, etc. But there needs to be some integrity that sits behind that as well. And so that's where we have our National Quality Assurance program, which we're just working up and just launching now through the Red Meat Profit Partnership, which has got 6 exporters and others are getting on involved as well. So that will underpin it with the integrity behind the story. And it's not that those functional attributes are not important. They're still very valuable with consumers. Consumer is very concerned about taste and quality. But I think when you get that emotional connection with the consumer, that kind of creates their social license then and that trust, which you can then tell some of those more functional attributes, the story around those as well. So it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but it's kind of it's building more of that social license, I guess.
James, just before we go, who's going to be telling this story? How will it play out? Is this going to be a B2B story where you're talking to the supermarket chains and that are supplied from New Zealand, or is this going to be a story that actually reaches out to individual consumers? Yeah,
good question, Roger. It'll be both. So this is a lot of this collateral that we're working up very collaboratively with our exporters, and so we'll be giving them the storytelling collateral which they can supply to their customers, as in sort of retailers or wholesale distributors. But also, particularly as we go into these new markets and do business to consumer type promotion, that will be very much around trying to hit the consumers. And so the idea is that when we establish these new markets, we would go into it with exporters lined up alongside us. It could be we'd partner up with a couple of exporters and do that. So it's very much a coordinated effort. Well, James, we've got to leave it there for now. We haven't talked about some of those new markets, so we'll have to come back to you at some other time, but we've run out of time today. Thanks heaps for your time. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure, Roger. Nice to chat.
This interview was brought to you in association with Rabobank.